This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch for this Monday, August 17th. I'm Mark Martin. We begin with nationwide protests calling for defunding and abolishing police departments still gathering steam. Months after the murder of George Floyd, crime rates and widespread violence are also growing. George Thomas has the latest.
From Los Angeles to New York City, from Philadelphia to San Francisco, the movement to defund police departments across the country is growing. This as at least 12 other cities also brace for severe budget cuts not seen in more than a decade. The result, some say, is a spike in violence nationwide. Days after the city council in Austin, Texas voted to slash $150 million from the police budget, 3 Cedar Park police officers, a suburb of the city, were shot on Sunday after a man barricaded himself with 3 of his family members.
I visited them in the hospital along with their families. They are all in stable condition and doing well.
The state's governor warning the cuts in police funding will pave the way for lawlessness. In Chicago, new video emerges showing a violent confrontation between Black Lives Matter protesters and police.
This group changed their appearance and began pushing our officers and eventually assaulting them.
One protester allegedly hitting a police officer repeatedly with a skateboard. The mayor of Chicago saying the attack on police officers was planned and that protesters came looking for a fight.
It's not spontaneous when you bring U-Haul trucks, cargo vans, and high-end robbery tools. We are determined to make sure that we get to the bottom of this and bring those responsible for this organized crime effort to justice.
Authorities in Chicago now monitoring social media sites for threats against officers and businesses.
What we want to do is expand our capacity in this space of looking at intelligence on open source.
And it's not just in Chicago. Violence now erupting in other major cities across the country as well. In New York City, more than 24 shootings in less than 48 hours. In Philadelphia, a mass shooting at a block party injures 3 teens and 2 others. Shots were also fired at police officers. 60 shell casings from several weapons were found on the scene, including rounds from an AR-15. On Sunday in Cincinnati, 18 people were shot, 4 killed in 4 different incidents.
Horrific and tragic that we have this much violence and potential for that much loss of life in our city.
Meanwhile, on Saturday, police in Stone Mountain, Georgia had to step in when militias and white supremacists faced off with hundreds of counter-protesters. A similar scene in Kalamazoo, Michigan, as fistfights erupted between members of an alleged racist group and counter-protesters. Police also had to intervene there. All this happening as a new study shows violent crimes on the rise nationwide. Murder rates in 20 major cities spiking by 37% between May and June of this year. Aggravated assaults also jumping by roughly the same amount during the same period. George Thomas, CBN News.
Dan Andros with FaithWire.com joins us now with more on what happened over the weekend. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, Mark.
This all started with peaceful protests over the death of George Floyd, but are these two things even really connected anymore?
Yeah, it's really hard to tell. The waters are very muddied. The messaging is very mixed. As we saw in places, as George mentioned there, all across the country, in places like Chicago, you see people coming in and what seems to start as peaceful protests then become agitated and violent. And you see people trying to mix it up in the crowd. The Chicago police just yesterday released a video showing where protesters were trying to say they were peaceful, but you see people with umbrellas positioning themselves in front of the line, and they were kind of like leaders of the group. And then you see the line push forward and head towards police. So there seemed to be one group who want some justice, but then there are other people who seem to want to fight.
Dan, a recent survey says most Americans aren't for defunding police, but these protests persist. Is there more going on with them? As George reported, some say they showed up looking for a fight.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem like there is a lot of political motivation behind some of these organizations. Again, the call to defund police has been very muddy. People say, well, we don't really mean defunding the police, and then they go into sort of different mixed messaging. So but as you said, I don't think people are for, polls are showing they're not for defunding the police. I don't think people look around at the riots around the country and think, yeah, less police is the answer here. So I think some of the mayors are starting to, be wise to that and respond accordingly and start actually supporting the police a little bit more, because I think they're realizing that going down that road is really not going to be beneficial to them politically, and especially not for the society.
Dan, do you think most Americans are ready to say enough is enough? For instance, last week at a Ronald McDonald charity house, it was vandalized. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that was really a shocking scene in Chicago. A Ronald McDonald house with at least 30 families in there. It's just a few blocks away from the Children's Hospital, so a lot of the families are there because their kids are sick, and they're just going back and forth and staying there while they're in the hospital. And so 30 families were in there as this Ronald McDonald house. The downstairs was shattered and looked like a bullet hole in the window during a weekend of protest, and that had the people there terrified, which, the organizers of the Ronald McDonald House say is just very unfortunate, because these families are already going through difficult times. Some had kids with cancer and who couldn't get home because of this situation, and, were forced to stay there, and not only are dealing with things like cancer, but they're absolutely terrified just for their own safety.
Where do you think all this is headed? Are these protests going to continue, and what can Americans and Christians do?
Well, I think the protesters and these groups that are agitating them, I think that they feel like this is a chance for them. So I think they're going to continue to try. But as the mayor of Chicago did, they put the police out there and they created the lines. And hopefully these mayors will start to realize that they need to just stand their ground on these protesters and not allow them to do what happened in Seattle and places like Portland, where they just let them run roughshod over the city and cause widespread damage. That's not good for anybody. So hopefully these mayors start to realize, we got to stand the line here. We can't allow these protests to get out of control.
And what should Christians do during this time?
Christians should absolutely be praying and looking for ways. We're supposed to be people, peacemakers whenever possible. And I realize, a lot of these people are not making it possible. But as Christians, that's the posture we're supposed to take. We're supposed to be the ones there that are pointing people to God and pointing people in the right direction. So that's in our own circles what we can continue to try to do.
All right, Dan Andros with faithwire.com. Thanks for your time, sir.
Thanks, Mark.
And you can catch faithwire.com's Faith versus Culture here on the CBN News Channel. It's tonight at 9:30 Eastern. Good news in the battle against COVID-19. Scientists monitoring immune responses to the virus are seeing signs of lasting immunity against the virus by those who only developed mild symptoms. They say disease-fighting antibodies, B and T cells, which are immunity cells, are able to recognize the virus and fight it even months after a person is infected. Grace Community Church members gathered to worship Sunday without the threat of legal action hanging over them. A judge ruled late Friday afternoon that Grace Community Church in Sun Valley, California, can continue hosting indoor worship services and does not have to adhere to any attendance caps or bans on singing. California megachurch pastor John MacArthur filed a lawsuit against Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom and other state officials over ongoing restrictions for churches amid the coronavirus pandemic. MacArthur says he's very grateful for the ruling and went on to say, "This vindicates our desire to stay open and serve our people. This also gives us an opportunity to show that we are not trying to be rebellious or unreasonable, but that we will stand firm to protect our church against unreasonable, unconstitutional restrictions." It's a big night and an historic one for the Democratic National Convention. The party kicks off its big event tonight virtually. The theme is We the People, and the party plans to talk about the three major crises concerning America. Right now, the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic downturn, and national unrest and racial injustice. A Texas judge ruled against a father and his rights in his son's medical and psychiatric care. LifeSite News reports Jeffrey Younger will no longer have a say in his 8-year-old son's care and well-being. He and his ex-wife have been in a legal battle over their son James's care in regard to gender identity. He claims the boy does not want a gender transition, but the mother says he does. The father says even the boy has been conflicted about the transition. You can find the full story at cbnnews.com. Typically, diversity in the workplace means recognizing race or gender or sexual orientation. But as Heather Sells reports, there's a growing movement to make workplaces more friendly for people of faith.
Last month, the international payment system PayPal launched Believe, an employee effort designed to promote awareness and understanding of workers' faiths and worldviews. And PayPal is not alone. Last year, Walmart introduced its employee faith group, joining other top companies like Texas Instruments, American Airlines, and Salesforce. Dr. Brian Grimm, president of the Religious Freedom and Business Foundation, spearheads the push to make corporate America faith-friendly.
They're not there to substitute for church or for going to synagogue or some other place of worship, but they're there to give support to employees, recognizing that if you bring your whole self to work, including your faith, that you're more likely to stick at the job, be excited about the job, and it gives you insights into customers and clients and your fellow employees, even if they're a different faith.
These groups could help fight workplace discrimination. In 2018, the EEOC had more complaints about religion than sexual orientation. And it's good business thanks to a growing population. By 2050, there will be 2.3 billion more religiously affiliated people on the planet. Research also shows economies thrive when cultures are open to religion.
Where you have a more open society to matters of faith, giving people the freedom to have a faith or change their faith or even have no faith at all, that coincides with more innovative thinking. It also coincides with a more robust civil society, all of which are important factors for having an economy that's built to last.
And corporate leaders say becoming faith-friendly can also help attract workers.
And it's a great message to go out to university campuses and to talk about diversity and inclusion at your company. To be able to say we have faith-based initiatives.
It's no longer just about constitutional freedom. Promoting religious diversity in the workplace can now be seen as just good business. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Coming up, why people are divided over the campaign to make Washington, D.C. the 51st state in America.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
How'd you like to get a redo on your health, on your body, on your arteries, so you could have the energy you had 20 years ago? The great news is you can. I'm Dr. Mike Roizen, chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. I've written 4 New York Times bestsellers. But even better than having to read all that, you can listen to this DVD and watch it. Protect your heart? Yes, you can. Here's how.
Go to CBN.com or call 1-800-700-7000 for your free copy of Protect Your Heart. Let the medical experts show you their new discoveries on how to avoid heart disease and even reverse it. Easy steps to uncover the hidden dangers in your medicine cabinet, reduce stress, and get a complete do-over for your health. Call 1-800-700-7000. That's 1-800-700-7000. Or go to CBN.com to claim your free copy of Protect Your Heart.
Welcome back. There's a movement to make Washington, D.C. America's 51st state. Our Jennifer Wishon reports on supporters who say it's about securing voting rights for those Americans who live in D.C., while critics say it's all about empowering a radical liberal agenda in Congress.
Each year, tens of millions of tourists flock here to Washington, D.C. from every corner of the globe. It's a one-of-a-kind place designed specifically and carefully laid out in the Constitution.
The framers wanted to have the seat of the new federal government independent of any given state.
Roger Pilon with the Cato Institute has twice testified before Congress about the implications of granting statehood to D.C.
They didn't want any given state to be disproportionately influential on the new government.
Neutral ground to conduct the people's business. And for people living in the district, Congress would serve as their local government. Today, the push from many of the 700,000 residents can be seen in the streets through the revolutionary slogan, taxation without representation. Since they pay federal taxes, residents want the right to elect their own representatives to Congress. Making the district a state has been debated for decades, and last month, the Democratic-controlled House approved it.
The District of Columbia Statehood Bill, H.R. 51, is passed.
Every Republican and one Democrat voted no. The bill takes the 10 square miles of Washington, D.C. as specified in the Constitution and reduces it to an enclave around the National Mall that would remain under congressional control. What's left would become the 51st state, called the Washington Douglas Commonwealth, a nod to both George Washington and Frederick Douglass. The measure is dead on arrival, at least for now, given the Republican-controlled Senate. President Trump also opposes it. Since the majority of D.C. residents are black, Speaker Pelosi and Democratic leaders saw now as an opportunistic time to champion the issue.
You might be wondering why D.C. is not yet a state, and it's actually a pretty easy one to answer. It is racism.
But opponents say the push for statehood is simply about political gain.
This proposal is plainly nothing but a Democratic power grab.
If representation is what residents want, they could push to return parts of the district to Maryland, which ceded the land to create the district in the first place. But here's the rub. That solution wouldn't allow for the addition of 2 new senators.
Our cause for statehood is certainly about making sure we have 2 voting senators to speak up for us and making sure that our Congresswoman has a vote.
And since D.C. voted for the Democratic nominee by 80% or more in the last 5 presidential contests, statehood would virtually guarantee 2 new Democratic senators.
This is not about enfranchising people. This is about expanding the Senate map to accommodate the most radical agenda that I've ever seen since I've been up here, getting more radical by the day. There's nothing these people won't do to change the face of the country, and we're tired of it. We're going to fight back.
Under the House plan, the federal government would become dependent on this 51st state for essentials like utilities, snow removal, and fire services. Pilon says recent Black Lives Matter demonstrations reveal how a D.C. state could possibly wreak havoc.
One can imagine scenarios that would be quite uncomfortable. For example, if you had the District of Columbia with its own state government, entirely Democratic, and you had a president who was Republican in the White House, you could imagine the temptation to, for example, withhold services.
If the Senate and White House flip to Democratic control, the measure will likely pass as Joe Biden supports it. Pilon argues it would then wind up in court because Congress simply doesn't have the authority to make D.C. a state through legislation.
Every Justice Department that has looked at this issue from the time when Robert Kennedy was an Attorney General in 1963 has said that Congress has no power to do what is contemplated in this bill.
That means a new amendment to the Constitution, which requires ratification by 3/4 of the states. The latest attempt came in 1978 when Democrats led Congress and Jimmy Carter was here at the White House. They passed a constitutional amendment aimed at giving D.C. voting representation in Congress. But at the end of the 7-year deadline, only 16 states had ratified it. Fast forward to 2020, and the most recent polling shows 64% of Americans still oppose adding D.C. as a state. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, the White House.
Still ahead, broadcasting hope in the form of prayer over Lebanon. How one ministry is covering the people of Lebanon after the recent massive explosion there.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire, Monday night at 9:30. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Watch The Global Lane, Thursday night at 9:30.
For staying with NewsWatch, the political and human impact of the recent explosion in Beirut has been vast, and the people are suffering a sense of despair. One Christian broadcaster is trying to ease that suffering by providing for their needs and offering hope. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has that story.
When the mushroom cloud blast ripped through Beirut, Arabic Christian broadcaster Sat7 jumped into action.
We started to broadcast prayers for people, for their safety, for those who lost loved ones, prayer for the responsible people in the government, like in the government, politicians, so that God may open their eyes so they can save people from this misery.
Sat7's George McKean told CBN News while broadcasting live worship, they brainstormed on how the church could help.
Thursday by another broadcast where just people praying and worshiping and speaking about where they can find hope, how we can find hope in such pain.
Several miles from the epicenter, their Beirut studio suffered very minor damage, but the homes of nearly all staff members were damaged. Still, they took action to help others.
They were in the streets downtown trying to clean and trying to distribute food, drinks to people and just pray with them and tell them that we feel with you. And hopefully in the coming few days, we will have a campaign called For Lebanon.
For 2 weeks, the campaign will use prayer to mark the exact time of the explosions, hoping to ease the memory. On the ground in Beirut, Juliana Sfer reported how the Lebanese had never experienced anything like this explosion, even in 15 years of civil war.
They have lost hope in their politicians. They have lost hope in the future. Please pray. Pray for protection from another civil war. Please pray for protection from immigration as well. A lot of our young people will want to leave now. Please pray for us here at Sat7 to be the church that heals.
Sat7 broadcasts to some 30 million people in the Middle East and North Africa, making the gospel available in Arabic, Farsi, and Turkish.
I think the most touching thing is the kind of prayers and sympathy and support that was coming from outside Lebanon, from Egyptians, Jordanians, Syrians. Lots of people who say that you are like, we feel with you, you mean a lot to us.
And while many work to clean up the overwhelming physical damage, McKean says their focus goes beyond the buildings.
it's much more important to build human capacity and build people trust in the future more than just building the buildings. And this is like what I wish and pray that we can contribute toward by what we are doing in our programs.
McKean says the desire for Lebanon is not only restoration, but to become a light to the rest of the Arab world. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Pray for the people of Lebanon. Well, coming up, 15-cent movie tickets. That's right. One of the nation's largest movie theater chains celebrates reopening with ticket prices from a century ago.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us.
Watch breaking news, exclusive stories and programs, credible news reporting.
We show you what's happening in the world and how you can pray about it.
This is CBN NewsWatch, because truth matters. Weekdays at 5 on the CBN News Channel.
Yes, right on time.
From Superbook.
Pepper's Pizza Palace is donating pizza for everyone today. Wait. I have big plans today.
Trust in God even when times are tough. He has a plan for your life.
Hey, we're gonna be late for the grand opening.
My parents want me to help with this outreach thing, feeding the community. What am I supposed to do here? Superbook!
Join the Superbook Club and get Superbook The Birth of Moses, plus 2 copies to share with others, all for your gift of only $25.
Pharaoh ordered all newborn Hebrew boys thrown into the Nile River, and I have a 3-month-old brother.
The Birth of Moses. Yours for a gift of only $25.
What will you do the next time the soldiers come? I do not know, but I trust God has a plan for all of us.
Superbook Club members, free streaming for seasons 1, 2, and 3 is now available.
AMC will reopen more than 100 theaters later this week with 15-cent prices. The country's largest movie theater chain will start showing movies again, advertising movies in 2020 at 1920 prices. You can see movies like Inception, Black Panther, Back to the Future, Grease, and Star Wars. After opening day, ticket prices will go up to $5. Still a deal compared to ticket prices before lockdowns closed theaters. The theaters will be set up for social distancing and undergo extra cleaning measures. Wow, 15 cents. That's going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Have a great day. Thanks again for watching.